Beneath the polluted sky of a hive world, a scar opened. It was not a metaphor, but a tear in the cosmic weave itself. Oil-slick clouds split apart, and something vast peeled away like burnt fabric. Through that fissure came light the color of arterial blood and sickly emerald. Its radiance turned the towering gantries and hive spires into skeletal silhouettes. Before we descend into the chaos of this tale, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more legends and dark histories from the Warhammer 40k universe. Oily rain hissed into vapor where it touched the crimson glare. The inhabitants of the upper platforms had never seen true stars. They were raised beneath smog and manufactorum exhaust. When the wound opened above them, they dropped their bundles and looked up with mouths open. Some made the sign of the Aquila with grease-black fingers. Others ran as the light spread. No prayer reached whatever god they imagined. The tear widened, and within its depths, shapes flickered. Two silhouettes emerged, falling without falling. One was slender and almost serene, moving with the grace of a reed bending in a breeze. The other had a leaner build, with long ears that flicked as though listening to some cosmic tune. Their passage left trails of impossible color. They were not made of flesh like the workers. Their forms were cut from a different fabric of reality. Their eyes took in this new world without fear. The taller figure carried a staff that glowed with its own calm luminescence. Around his neck was a symbol that meant nothing to this place. His expression was that of someone who had seen countless worlds and been bored by most of them. The smaller one wore armor reminiscent of ancient royalty, and his golden eyes gleamed with hungry curiosity. He was Beerus, god of destruction from Universe 7, though the Hivers had no words for such a concept. Beside him was Whis, his mentor and attendant, whose mastery over time and martial discipline made him the apex of their universe. They descended toward the hive like comets, their fall slowed by will alone. The sky around them roared. Beneath, servo skulls recorded flickering images and transmitted data to command centers miles away. Vox operators screamed about an unidentified incursion. Sensor arrays overloaded as energy signatures inconsistent with anything in Imperial records registered. The tear sealed itself behind them with a sound like distant thunder, leaving the polluted atmosphere to swallow the crimson glow. The two figures landed atop a rusted platform that swayed under their weight. No crater formed. Their arrival was silent, but its implications rippled through the city. Beerus took in the vista. Towers rose like grave markers, each one adorned with the skull and double-headed eagle of a distant emperor. Endless hab-blocks stacked upon one another in tiers, connected by skeletal bridges and conveyor lines. The air smelled of chemical discharge, recycled sweat, and machine oil. Far below, tiny figures moved with the frantic purpose of insects. The god's nose twitched. He felt no divine presence like his own. Instead, something else whispered beneath reality, a sea of psychic tides known to the natives as the warp. Its touch was thicker here, more bitter, more actively malevolent than the Kai he knew. Wiz sensed it too, swirling currents of insanity and raw emotion, and catalogued them with professional detachment. He noted the absence of any proper restaurants. Beerus's eyes narrowed. This world was loud, filthy, and filled with panic. He wondered if any food here could satisfy him. Hunger had driven him out of naps more decisively than prophecy. For a moment he considered returning through the tier. Then he felt something else, a distant pulse of power far to the east, deep below layers of rock and iron. It was faint but challenging. He smiled slowly. Sirens began to wail. Every gun on the platform tracked the newcomers. Beerus's tail swished lazily. Wiz tilted his head with polite curiosity. Neither moved. The planet itself seemed to hold its breath. The sky closed, but something ancient in the darkness stirred. Steam hissed from broken vents as Beerus leapt down from the platform into a maze of catwalks and cables. The hive interior was a tangled skeleton of walkways, cranes, and storage stacks. The god of destruction moved with the balance of a predator exploring new territory, each step silent despite the rusted grating beneath. Whiz drifted a few paces behind, his feet never touching the ground, staff spinning lazily. The smell of recycled air thickened. Voices echoed from below, punctuated by the bark of an Arbeits officer and the clanging of machinery. Somewhere deeper in the structure, a chant rose, rhythmic and savage. Hunger gnawed at Beerus's patience. He had slept for decades, awakened only by prophecy and the promise of a culinary delight. This world offered none of his temple's comforts. The hivers ate nutrient paste and reprocessed protein. He sniffed and grimaced. Yet there was a different kind of promise here. He felt it in the vibrations under his feet. It was not sustenance but challenge. A presence, like a half-heard drumbeat somewhere at the heart of the hive, beckoned, daring him to find it. As they descended, the architecture changed. Ornate statues gave way to bare rockcrete and exposed pipes. Lights flickered and went dark as power was rerouted. Feral shapes lurked in the shadows, gaunt men and women with shaved heads and scarred faces. They wore tattered robes marked with crude symbols daubed in blood. Their eyes glittered with madness as they swung chains and axes. They surged toward him with cries of blood and skulls. Beerus tilted his head and watched their approach with mild curiosity. Their ki flickered like candle flames. He raised one finger. The cultists leapt. Time seemed to slow as Whis observed, collecting data on reaction speed and strike patterns. Beerus tapped the air. A pulse of purple light radiated outward. It passed through railings, rockcrete, and cultists alike. Flesh and bone turned to fine ash in an instant. Blood spattered where limbs had been. The remains drifted down like dust. One sword clattered on the floor, its handle smoking. The chanting died with the last breath of those who had made it. He flexed his fingers as if testing how much effort that required. It had been little more than the flick of a fingernail. The ease with which he eliminated threats kept him from expending unnecessary energy. He looked at the ash with faint disappointment. Still, the drumbeat remained, insistent. Each level vibrated more strongly. Noise of industry faded, replaced by muffled cries and the sound of chains dragging across stone. Beerus sniffed again. The air was thicker now with incense and burnt meat. He felt the warp currents swirling. They tugged at his ki like unseen fingers. He bared his teeth and shook his head, scattering the voices like cobwebs. Whis consulted his staff, tapping it lightly against the floor. A translucent display appeared before him, filled with sigils of his own design. He traced lines of energy through the hive, mapping the density of warp activity. His eyes widened slightly as he noted peaks and troughs. He saw how the drumbeat corresponded to a ritual pattern carved into the city's foundations. He murmured something about resonance and caution. Beerus grunted acknowledgement. He trusted Whis's counsel, even if he rarely followed it without protest. At the next junction, a group of hive gangers huddled by a vendor stall, smoking El-Ho sticks and trading scavenged machine parts. They looked up as the two figures approached. Instead of charging, they backed away, pressing themselves against the wall. They had seen the flash of purple light. Fear slid across their faces. One dropped his pipe. Beerus walked past without a glance. He was not here for them. He was here for whatever beat in the darkness like a heart made of knives. Somewhere far below in the depths of the hive, something old and bloody waited. Hunger gave way to curiosity. A predator followed a scent of power deeper into the labyrinth. Motion sensors hidden in vent shafts tracked them. Servo skulls whirred overhead like metal insects, their red optic lenses glinting in the gloom. Data relays transmitted images to cramped rooms where Arbeits in black armor hunched over cogitators. Orders crackled through Vox units. A dozen precincts coordinated, overlaying data with rumor. The names of saints and inquisitors were invoked along with access codes. Each new report raised more questions. Nothing in the Administratum's endless archives matched the energy readings. No known Xenos race exhibited such effortless disregard for grav plating. No sanctioned psyker radiated that kind of controlled annihilation. Beerus felt the eyes upon him. He sensed mortal consciousness like tiny sparks flickering beyond walls and down corridors. Fear had a taste, sour and metallic. Determination had a different flavor, sharper, spiced with desperation. He allowed himself a small purr of amusement. On one level above them, Judge Marshal Varek gripped a bolt pistol, its weight familiar. He barked orders to his squad: block the western corridor, seal the blast doors, do not engage until commanded. His voice was steady, but his hands sweated. He watched the feed, saw the purple-skinned entity eliminate cultists with a gesture, heard prayers from his men. He wondered if the oath he had sworn included confronting a being that could erase men as easily as dust. Beerus continued without slowing. He had grown used to being monitored. Gods of destruction rarely traveled without attracting attention. Here, the Watchers hid behind steel and machine spirits. He could have obliterated them with a thought, but there was no sport in that. The path downward glowed in his mind like a river of purple kai. The corridor opened into a vault lined with columns. Reliefs of the Emperor's victories loomed in half-light, faces eroded by soot. At the far end, a barricade of crates and sandbags had been erected. Behind it crouched Arbites, weapons aimed. The Judge-Marshal raised his gloved hand to halt. His lips moved in a warning that carried over the vox. Words about jurisdiction and orders. Beerus's ears flicked again. The sound meant nothing to him. He stopped within a meter of the barricade, not because of the guns, but because he wanted to examine the relief behind the Arbites. It depicted a man ascending to a throne of iron surrounded by rays of light. Beerus raised a brow. He sensed a faint psychic echo from the stone, a lingering trace of devotion. He regarded the Judge-Marshal with mild interest. Hearts hammered. Beads of sweat trickled down their cheeks. Bolt pistols targeting runes flickered. For a heartbeat that stretched like a drawn bow, nothing moved. Then Beerus yawned. The sound was audible even over the hum of ventilation. His jaw cracked. He lifted a hand as if to scratch his ear, and the guns jerked upward involuntarily. He lowered his hand before their fingers tightened on triggers. Then he stepped sideways. A blur! The Arbites blinked, and he was past them, standing at the edge of a shaft that dropped into darkness. Their heads snapped around, searching for a figure that had moved faster than their eyes. Judge Marshal Varek whispered a prayer. He would later report that the Emperor himself must have shielded them. Wiss's voice drifted through the vault like a breeze. He thanked the Arbites for their vigilance and apologized softly for the inconvenience. His tone was polite yet distant, as if speaking to children. He touched his staff to the floor, and a faint ring of light traced across the rockcrete. The Arbites blinked again, and their fear softened. They felt inexplicably calmer. Beerus did not wait. He stepped into the shaft and descended, using Kai to slow his fall. Wiss followed. Above them, the Arbites lowered their weapons. The Judge-Marshal exhaled. The Watchers remained above. The eyes in the shadows shifted their gaze elsewhere. The shaft opened into a cavernous chamber carved out of bedrock. The ceiling vanished into shadow, supported by pillars of ceramite and bone. Ancient machines lined the walls. Some still glowed with faint internal light. Others had been gutted and repurposed into shrines. In the center, a pool of viscous fluid bubbled, its surface reflecting flickering red light from torches. This was not holy water, but runoff from generators mixed with blood, spilled in rituals. Wiss floated to the ground beside Beerus and scanned the chamber. His staff emitted a soft tone as he manipulated its functions. Runic script traced along its length, describing energies that did not belong in their universe. He compared them to known metrics, evaluated the stability of local time flows, and adjusted his presence. Wiss's mastery of Ultra Instinct allowed him to exist beyond intention, his body moving in perfect harmony. Even here, where the warp thinned the veil between reality and madness, he remained balanced. Beerus watched his mentor from the corner of his eye. He had known Wiss for eons, yet there were moments when the angel's serenity surprised him. The angel's white hair remained pristine despite the soot drifting through the air. His pale blue skin seemed to glow softly, an island of color in the monochromatic gloom. Wiss moved his fingers through the air, drawing symbols that hung like luminescent threads before dissolving. "A curious resonance," Wiss remarked, "more thought than sound." Beerus felt it as vibrations. His mentor noted how the warp currents followed a spiral pattern converging beneath the bubbling pool, feeding into glyphs carved into the floor. Beerus traced a claw along the nearest glyph. The stone crumbled under his touch. He felt the surge of psychic energy trapped within and how it resisted his attempt to dissipate it. These marks were old, older than the hive's most recent construction. Someone had reinforced them with layers of sacrifice. He sniffed. The smell of burnt flesh hung heavy. The god of destruction did not care about motivations behind rituals. He cared only that the power might provide entertainment. Wes finished his assessment and looked at Beerus with the faintest tilt of his head. There was caution in that gesture, reminding Beerus of training sessions long past. The cat-like god tightened his grip on his own power. He had a tendency to overreact when irritated. In Universe 7, this had resulted in the destruction of half a world over underwhelming pudding. Here, the slightest loss of control could shatter entire sectors. "Patience," Wiz advised without sound. Beerus's ears flattened. The word chafed, but he knew its importance. He inhaled and exhaled slowly. He reminded himself that the presence he sought pulsed deeper still. This chamber was a tributary, not the source. He adjusted his course. Quiss's eyes softened in approval. They moved together, avoiding the pool. Cult detritus littered the floor, charred candles, broken chains, skulls. Faint echoes of past screams clung to the stones. Beerus's tail flicked, sensing the layout. He saw how columns were inscribed with wards. Wiz recognized them as part of a circle. At the far side, steps led downward through an archway carved with skulls and serpents. The drumbeat that had haunted Beerus grew louder down those steps. It matched the pulse he felt when he prepared to destroy a star. His heart quickened. Wiz paused and rewound time a handful of seconds, observing energy patterns. He watched echoes of cultists moving, their shadows performing tasks. He saw a rift like the one that had brought them here, less controlled. He let the vision fade and resumed the present. "Interesting," he mused. Beerus's ears twitched. Curiosity warred with hunger. Wiz gestured down the stairs. They descended side by side. The chamber above echoed behind them. The last thing Beerus heard was the drip of viscous fluid and the beat of energy growing louder below. The air thickened with incense and blood. The staircase ended at a massive steel door adorned with bronze skulls. Chains dangled from its sides, each link engraved with names in a language Beerus did not recognize. The door had no handle. It responded to power. Beerus pressed his palm against it. Warp-touched iron groaned. He pushed lightly, and the door swung inward on silent hinges. Beyond lay a cavernous space lit by hundreds of candles. Their flames flickered blue and crimson, casting long shadows on walls covered in frescoes of carnage. Row upon row of cultists knelt before a raised platform. They wore flayed skin as cloaks and iron collars around their necks. Their heads were shaved, revealing scars carved into their scalps in the shape of 8 pointed symbols. They chanted as one, voices merging into a guttural hum. Each inhale drew air through sharpened teeth. Each exhale was a word for blood. In the middle of the platform, a man stood, or something that had been a man. His armor was brass fused with flesh. Horns protruded from his forehead. In one hand, he carried a serrated chain blade. In the other, a bowl overflowing with still steaming blood. The champion lifted the bowl and poured blood into grooves carved into the platform. The fluid traced lines forming part of a larger symbol etched into the floor. Beerus observed. He felt the pull of the power gathering. It tugged at his own Kai like a strong current. He glanced at Whis. His mentor's expression did not change. Eyes saw how the ritual threatened to open a portal to a part of the warp dominated by a being whose nature echoed destruction. Beerus tilted his head. There was arrogance in the champion's stance, certainty that his offering would please his god. Beerus did not like being challenged by mortals or by gods unknown. The champion noticed the newcomers. His eyes widened and a guttural laugh tore from his throat. He lifted his chain blade and pointed it at Beerus. Words spilled about skulls and thrones. He demanded kneeling. His followers turned as one, eyes rolling. They brandished rusted axes and cleavers. They charged. Hundreds of feet pounded the stone. Beerus sighed. He lifted one hand and flicked his wrist. A shock wave rippled through the chamber. It was not light but raw destruction. Where it passed, matter erased. Flesh vanished. Chains fell. Blood turned to steam. The wave curved around Whis, who hovered unperturbed. The champion stumbled as the cultists directly in front of him disappeared. He stared at empty space. An instant later, he roared and leapt from the platform, swinging his chain blade. Beerus watched him come. The champion moved with speed and strength far beyond a normal human's, warp energy crackling around his blade. Beerus raised a finger. The chain blade connected. The god's finger did not move. The blade shattered. The champion's eyes widened. Beerus tapped his forehead. Hakai. Reality unraveled. The champion disintegrated, body and armor becoming motes of nothingness. His scream cut off mid-breath. Silence fell. The grooves remained filled with blood, but the ritual was broken. The energy dissipated. Somewhere in the warp, a god snarled, denied a meal. Beerus dusted his hand. Whis drifted closer, peering at the grooves. He noted how the design matched patterns recorded in the celestial archives. He tapped his staff. The symbol cracked, its power spent. Beerus looked around. Ash drifted like snow. The frescoes still depicted slaughter, but the real slaughter had lasted only seconds. The god of destruction felt no satisfaction. This had not been a fight, but an execution. Still, the drumbeat continued, deeper and louder, urging him onward. He sniffed. The scent of challenge still lay ahead. He stepped over the steaming remains and moved toward another passage. Whis followed, staff leaving faint after-images. Behind them, candles guttered. Blood turned brown. Far above, the hive continued its life, unaware that a ritual intended to merge realms had been erased by a gesture. Data traffic across the hive's Vox network spiked as soon as the cult chamber went dark. Adeptus Mechanica stations registered anomalies in energy output. Inquisitorial officers aboard Grim ships received reports that made little sense. Sensors recorded a surge of destructive force localized to a set of coordinates. Then they recorded nothing. No warp incursion, no further cult activity. Just a gap, as if something had excised a piece of reality. In a monastery on the hive's highest level, a cloister of Sisters of Battle paused their prayers as a flare of purple light illuminated chapel windows. They looked at one another. Their canoness crossed herself and returned to her hymn. Deep in the strategium of an orbiting battle cruiser, Inquisitor Vorenth listened to the Vox feed with a frown. Reports from his acolytes spoke of monsters from legend and gods beyond understanding. He had read treatises on extra-dimensional incursions. He had studied works of radical inquisitors who posited parallel universes. He never expected to test those theories. He debated ordering an orbital strike. Exterminatus was a word he carried like a dagger, always considered. Beerus felt those debates as a distant irritation. The warp currents carried emotions of those who tapped into them. Anger, fear, zealotry. He tasted them like spices in the air. They did not distract him. If anything, the swirling mixture reminded him of a stew Whis had once served, concocted from a dozen starfish and a single cosmic root. The energies were complex, yet unsatisfying. They touched his fur and rolled off without penetrating. Mortal desperation rarely moved a god. Whis, however, catalogued everything. His staff flashed as he intercepted encrypted vox calls, translating static into meaning. He heard inquisitorial baritones issuing orders, clipped responses of space marine captains, machine-tinged reports from tech priests. He considered permutations. The Imperium's response could range from sending a strike team to glassing the hive. He weighed those outcomes against Beerus's temper. He knew his student could misinterpret an orbital bombardment as a challenge. Teaching patience in the face of provocation was ongoing discipline. As they continued downward, the passage narrowed. The air grew colder, less corrupted by sweat and more by ancient damp. The walls were lined with pipes that rattled with the flow of unknown fluids. Occasional lumens flickered, casting jumpy shadows. In one alcove, a shrine to a saint had been defaced. Someone had scratched over the saint's serene face with a crude depiction of a skull. The saint's hands still held a book, though its pages had been torn out for kindling. A speaker grill embedded in the wall crackled as Beerus passed. A voice, metallic and authoritative, issued commands. Identification demanded. Threat warnings broadcast. It was directed at them. A code phrase for surrender repeated. Beerus cocked his head, listening to the cadence rather than the content. There was confidence in the voice. There was also fear. He waved his tail dismissively. The speaker sparked and went silent, as if embarrassed. They entered a maintenance access, climbing down a ladder that extended for hundreds of meters. Beerus gripped the rungs lightly, using Kai to control his descent. Whis floated, his feet inches above each rung. In the darkness, they could have been ghosts. Far above, the Inquisitor's hand hovered over the button that would authorize Exterminatus. Far below, the drumbeat grew so loud that Beerus could feel it in his bones. Voices chanted in languages older than any imperial tongue, words mirroring war drums used in Saiyan legends. The gods' pupils narrowed with anticipation. Whis whispered a thought across their link, an admonition that they could leave now without consequence. Beerus ignored it. Curiosity compelled him. The only true law that mattered was his own desire. He followed it downward. Beerus emerged from the ladder into a corridor humming with electrical discharge. Red lumens bathed the passage. Shell casings littered the floor. 5 towering figures in midnight armor moved ahead, their presence unmistakable. Deathwatch Astartes, veterans of countless wars. They took positions behind crates, bolters raised. Brother Lieutenant Corvath read the data streaming across his helm. Unknown Xenos, engage with caution. He signaled his squad. They aimed. Mass reactive shells roared down the corridor. Beerus saw them, eyes widening. His body blurred, moving faster than thought. Bolter rounds passed through empty air, detonating against walls. He slipped along the floor, behind a pillar. Debris exploded where he had been. The Marines recalibrated, adjusting for speed. Corvath barked commands. Spread out. Flank. Brother Varnus loaded penetrator rounds. Brother Saval's heavy bolter spat death. Beerus ducked, slid, leapt, each movement fluid. He came to rest on a conduit above them. From his perch, he studied them. Augmented bodies, disciplined minds, lethal intent. They impressed him more than the cultists had. Corvath saw him perched and swung his chainsword. Beerus dropped, the blade whistling past his ear. He tapped the Marine's helmet. A pulse of ki disrupted neural pathways. Brother Kale froze and toppled. Brother Varnus fired. Beerus flicked a finger. A shockwave overturned crates, sending Marines staggering. Brother Savel cursed as his heavy bolter jammed, machine spirit sulking under Whiss's subtle interference. Whiss hovered nearby, eyes half-closed, staff spinning. His presence disrupted targeting systems without overt aggression. The Astartes fought on, courage unwavering, firing even as they slid across the deck. Beerus appreciated their determination, but grew bored. He raised his hand. A ripple of force rolled outward. It struck the Marines like a giant's shove, sending them crashing into machinery. Armor dented. Bolters clattered. No bones broke. He had tempered his power. The Marines groaned, stunned. Korvath spat blood and tried to rise. He saw the purple figure watching, expression unreadable. Beerus shrugged. He had no reason to kill them. He bounded over their prone forms, footsteps light. Whiss drifted forward. His eyes met Korvath's through a cracked visor. The Marine saw no malice there, only calculation. A thought brushed his mind. Live. Then the angel followed his charge. The Death Watch lay for several heartbeats, systems recalibrating. They had faced Tyranids, orcs, demons. They'd never seen anything move like that. When they staggered to their feet, their quarry was gone. Korvath thumbed his vox. Inquisitor, target is beyond our capability. Requesting guidance. Static and curt commands replied, hold, observe, do not engage alone. He clenched his jaw. He would obey. He gathered his squad. They retrieved their weapons. They set off in pursuit at a distance, recording. They would watch, learn, and wait for an opportunity that perhaps would never come. Beerus and Whiss continued deeper, unaware or unconcerned. For them, the Astartes were a momentary diversion, another footnote in a day already filled with many. Ahead, the corridor descended in switchback ramps. The hum of warp energy intensified. Beerus increased his pace. Whiss floated along, eyes half-lidded. At one bend, ancient cogitator towers rose like dead trees. Their screens flickered with lines of code and prayer. Whispering voices came from vents, indecipherable. Beerus ignored them. He was focused on the beat. They entered a smaller chamber filled with altars carved from metal scrap. Bones were arranged in spirals around each one. At the center sat a device like a cross between a generator and an idol. It hummed quietly. Its surface was inscribed with sigils similar to those in the earlier chamber, but here they glowed sickly green. Beerus reached toward it, drawn by curiosity and by the similarity of the energy signature to the tear that had brought them here. Whiss lifted his staff and touched Beerus's hand, stopping it. The angel's eyes met Beerus's. There was no reprimand, only caution. He moved his staff to the idol and tapped it lightly. Time reversed. The device's glow dimmed. Bones realigned themselves. Ash swirling in the air coalesced and returned to cracks. The hum wound backward into silence. Then, in the space of a breath, the scene moved forward. Bones slid back. The glow returned. The hum rose. Whiss had reset the room by seconds, playing it forward and backward. He observed the flow of energy, measuring how it moved, and what triggered shifts. Beerus felt the reversal like a cool breeze across his skin. He watched the device flex, almost as if it breathed. He frowned. In Universe 7, time reversals were rare and precious. Whiss wielded the technique effortlessly here, but not frivolously. He examined the energy the device drew from the warp. He assessed whether touching it would anchor them to this reality or eject them violently. He concluded that interfering here would be like pulling at a thread. It might unravel the entire weave prematurely. Not yet, the thought came. Beerus grunted assent. He tucked his hands behind his back and paced the room. His tail traced circles in the air. A smell of roasted grains and sugar suddenly tickled his nose. It was faint but unmistakable, the scent of something edible, something pleasant. In a nest of metal and decay, the scent was as out of place as they were. Beerus's pupils dilated. Whiss arched a brow. They followed the scent down a side passage. It grew stronger, mingling with the metallic tang of blood and oil. They turned a corner and entered what had once been a mess hall. Tables lined the room. At one table, a small, lonely bowl sat, steam rising from its contents. Beerus crossed the distance. He looked into the bowl. The scent was divine. He lifted the spoon. Whis cleared his throat. He extended his staff, pointing at thin wires crisscrossing around the bowl, connected to a device under the table. On the ceiling, tiny lenses glittered. A trap. Beerus sighed and lowered the spoon. He flicked his finger. The bowl vanished. The device detonated in empty air, flames licking the ceiling. A shock wave rocked the room, then dissipated. The trap sprung, nothing left to do but move on. Patience, Whis repeated, amused. Beerus glared. His stomach rumbled. Whis smiled and produced a small pastry from his sleeve. Beerus snatched it, stuffed it into his mouth and chewed. Sweetness exploded on his tongue. For a moment the smells of blood and oil receded. He savoured. His mood improved. They left the mess hall, stepping over the charred remains of the trap. Time tugged at them, but so did hunger. They continued downward, one guided by curiosity, the other by duty, both by the scent of power still growing stronger. The deeper they went, the heavier the air became. It was not physical heaviness, but a psychic weight pressing against Beerus's mind. He shook his head, annoyed, and pushed back with his own key. The pressure receded but did not vanish. It reminded him of an encounter with another god, one whose sphere was creation rather than destruction. That god's presence had been warm and inviting. This one was cold, distant and burdened. It radiated from far above, yet its touch reached even here. Whis felt it too. He paused at a landing and closed his eyes. Images flickered across his mind, carried by psychic waves. A golden throne, massive and ornate, bathed in the light of 1,000 lamps. On it, a figure emaciated and skeletal, yet radiating power like a dying sun. Cables pierced his flesh, connecting him to machines that hummed with the power of an entire planet. His eyes were closed, his lips unmoving, yet his mind screamed across the stars. It was a beacon, a lighthouse in a sea of madness. It called to humanity's souls, guiding them through the warp. It held at bay tides of chaos. It was also a prison. Beerus saw none of the details, but felt the presence. It was ancient and weary, older than his own existence. It was human, yet more than human, elevated and degraded in equal measure. It reached for him, not with intention, but with awareness. It recognized the god walking in its world as something other. For a moment their consciousness brushed. Beerus felt infinite pain and infinite resolve. The Emperor of Mankind felt curiosity and disdain. Neither spoke. There was only contact and then withdrawal. The beacon did not waver. The god of destruction shook his head like a cat shaking off water. The contact lingered as an itch. Beerus considered turning his attention upward. Who was this figure who dared to exist in such a state, neither alive nor dead, worshipped as a god but entombed in machinery? The challenge teased him. If he destroyed the throne, what would happen? Universe 7 had its own hierarchies of gods. This universe seemed to center around a single will. Beerus's tail twitched. He glanced at Whis. His mentor's expression was unreadable. The angel knew about such decisions. He said nothing. The moment passed. Below them the drumbeat changed. It accelerated, the rhythm more frantic. The ritual they had interrupted earlier was not the only one. Others echoed through lower levels, each feeding power into a central nexus. Beerus's senses sharpened. The presence of the Emperor receded as warp swells increased. He returned his focus to the immediate challenge. He would not be drawn into a theological debate with a corpse on a throne when there was entertainment at hand. They reached a door unlike the others, made of black material that absorbed light. No symbols adorned it. Instead, it hummed with a frequency that made Beerus's fur stand on end. Whis placed his hand on it. He felt layers of protective wards, old and renewed over centuries. He raised his staff and drew circles in the air. The wards unraveled. The door slid open with a sigh. A wave of heat and corrupt energy rushed out, striking them like a physical blow. Beerus grinned. Here it was, the heart of the drumbeat. Beyond, a cavern opened. Its ceiling stretched high, disappearing into smoke. Its floor was carved into concentric circles filled with symbols pulsing crimson. At its center, a tear in reality gaped, swirling with colors of coagulated blood and green lightning. It crackled with unstable energy. From within, something pressed, eager to emerge. Beerus stepped forward, the Emperor's distant gaze forgotten. The air tasted of iron and ozone. The smell of demon blood and molten metal mixed. The warp rift churned. He could feel eyes watching from its depths, hungry and hateful. He licked his lips. Wiz followed, staff held loosely, eyes scanning. He felt the temperature of time fluctuations, the speed of energy exchange. He prepared to intervene if necessary. In the darkness, only the gods and the demons saw clearly. Beyond the black door, the chamber's air shimmered with raw power. At its heart, a tear in reality pulsed like a malignant star. Concentric circles carved into the floor glowed crimson, each line filled with blood. Chains anchored dozens of cultists to stone pillars, their bodies arching in agony as they chanted. Standing among them were two leaders. One, a hulking figure fused with brass armor, horns jutting from his head, brandished a chain axe dripping with oil and gore. The other, cloaked in sigil-covered robes, clutched a staff crowned with a throbbing crystal. Together they orchestrated the ritual. Beerus entered without ceremony. His pupils narrowed as he measured the warp energies. The horned champion snarled and advanced, swinging the chain axe in wide arcs. The blade hummed with warp fire. Beerus waited until the last moment, then stepped aside with lazy grace. The axe bit into stone, carving a furrow. Beerus touched the weapon lightly. It disintegrated. The champion howled, swinging with his fists. Beerus's hand shot out. He pressed two fingers to the champion's chest. Reality rippled. Hakai. Flesh and armor dissolved into grey dust. Horns clattered on the blood-slick floor. The sorcerer raised his staff, drawing energy from the tear. Bolts of crimson and green streaked toward the god of destruction.
Beerus battered them away.
They exploded against the walls, leaving smoking scars. The sorcerer chanted faster, weaving complex patterns. His eyes glowed with unnatural light. He invoked names that made mortals weep. Beerus stepped through the barrage as though strolling in rain. He reached the robed figure, placed his palm on the man's chest, and whispered destruction without sound. Hakai, the sorcerer, stiffened. The energy he commanded turned inward. His body cracked, dissolved, and was gone. His staff fell clattering, its crystal dim. Around them chains rattled as cultists continued their chant, oblivious or ecstatic. Blood ran through the grooves, feeding the circle. The tear widened and buckled. Something massive pushed from the other side, testing the boundary. Beerus considered. He sensed its hunger. He weighed his curiosity. Wiz floated beside him, staff spinning slowly. The angel's eyes conveyed a warning. Beerus's tail flicked. He raised his finger. Purple energy gathered at the tip. He pointed at the rift. A beam shot forth, disappearing into the swirling maw. Inside, it expanded like a contained supernova. The warp shuddered.
Unseen entities screamed.
The tear convulsed and began to fold in on itself. The circles cracked. Blood boiled away. Chains slackened as cultists collapsed. The tear collapsed entirely, with a sound like a sigh. The chamber went dark, except for guttering candles. The oppressive pressure lifted. The drumbeat ceased. Beerus lowered his hand. He rotated his wrist as if loosening stiff joints. It had required effort, but not enough to tire him. He felt a faint sting of disappointment. Wiz tapped his staff once. A ring of light spread across the chamber, strengthening the walls and sealing cracks. He felt the warps retreat, knowing it would never abandon this place entirely. The god of destruction surveyed the carnage.
Ash drifted like snow.
The two leaders were gone. The tear was closed. He shrugged.
Maybe he cared about the challenge, maybe the noise.
Whatever the reason, the ritual was broken. He looked to Whis. The angel nodded. They turned toward another passage. The god's ears twitched. Somewhere beyond, new footsteps echoed. The story was not yet finished. As the echoes of collapsing reality faded, the chamber trembled again. The seal had not entirely shut. A talon, like a spear of obsidian, slammed through the narrowing rift, anchoring itself in the floor. A head pushed through, horned and crowned with a crest of bone.
Eyes like pits of lava glared.
A maw filled with jagged teeth opened in a silent roar. The greater demon forced its way into reality, dragging with it a smell of sulfur and iron. Its skin was a patchwork of scales and exposed muscle, armor fused into flesh. Two pairs of arms ended in claws.
Wings of ragged membrane unfurled.
Chains of skulls hung from its waist. Its presence warped the air, bending light. Whis moved to the side, staff ready. He had calculated the possible emergence of a daemon. He knew Beerus would relish the fight, but also that it could draw attention from other powers. He prepared to step in if the battle threatened to spill beyond. The demon reared up, claws scraping, wings beating soot into the air.
It charged.
It swung one clawed arm with the force of an artillery shell. Beerus met it with his forearm. The impact cracked the stone under his feet. He slid backward 2 paces. He grinned. It had been a long time since something physical pushed him. He retaliated. He shot forward, palm open. His blow landed on the daemon's chest. Flesh rippled, ribs cracking. It stumbled but did not fall.
It swept its tail.
Beerus leapt, twisting. He landed on the daemon's shoulder and drove his elbow into its collar.
Bone shattered.
The creature shrieked, swatting at him. Beerus darted away, blurring across the chamber. Warp energy gathered around the daemon's throat. It vomited a stream of green fire. The flame washed over Beerus's position, melting rock. The god of destruction crossed his arms, conjuring a shield of ki. The flame hit, enveloping him. When the fire abated, Beerus stood unharmed. He raised his hand, fingers splayed. Purple motes of light formed above his palm, growing into spheres. He flicked them one by one. Each sphere homed in on the demon, impacting with detonations that rocked the chamber.
Flesh and armor tore.
The daemon roared. It lunged again. For several exchanges they danced. Beerus's movements were fluid, almost lazy. He evaded blows by millimeters. He responded with strikes that carried the weight of suns. Each time he hit, pieces of the demon vaporized. Each time the creature struck, his ki shield absorbed or deflected the force. Eventually, Beerus grew bored. The demon had no strategy beyond rage. It swung, breathed fire, and roared. It regenerated as quickly as he tore it apart. He decided to end it. He dodged under a sweeping claw, planted his feet, and thrust his palm forward. Hakai. Purple light enveloped the daemon.
It screamed.
Its wings crumbled, its claws blackened. Flesh sloughed off bone, bone turned to vapor. Energy dissipated. In seconds there was nothing. Not ash, not blood, nothing. The rift shuddered, closed fully and sealed. Chains of skulls clattered to the floor, empty and lifeless. Beerus lowered his hand. He exhaled slowly, the battle adrenaline dissipating. He rolled his shoulders. That had been moderately satisfying. He looked at Whis. The angel nodded in approval. The exercise had been beneficial. Beerus's thrummed. The smell of sulfur faded. Silence returned. From far above, the Emperor's beacon continued to pulse, impassive. In the chamber, 2 gods stood surrounded by ruins of a ritual and the absence of a demon. The challenge had been met and annihilated. Beerus chuckled quietly. He flicked one of the fallen skulls with his tail. It rolled into a crack. He turned toward the passage out. There was nothing left here. The real entertainment lay not in destroying demons, but in seeing what the mortals watching them would do next. He walked away. Whiz followed. The last echo of the demon's scream faded into stone, while Beerus and Whis traced their way through the underhive. Far above, a conclave gathered in a chamber of marble and gold. Surrounded by tapestries depicting the Emperor's victories, Inquisitor Vorinth addressed a line of Vox units, each one connected to a different ship or bastion. Red runes and green graphs hovered in hololithic displays showing energy spikes and kill counts. The entity demonstrates power beyond anything recorded, Vorinth stated, his tone controlled. It does not exhibit warp taint. It resists conventional weaponry. It shows no allegiance to the Emperor. The ritual sites have been destroyed, but not by our hands. The entity acts according to its own purpose. He paused. The governor wrung his hands. Tech priests clicked, data streaming. A sister murmured prayers.
A Death Watch captain scowled. Exterminatus? Asked an admiral.
The word hung heavy. To unleash Exterminatus was to render the planet a cinder. It was both salvation and sin, Vorinth considered. Unknown entity of godlike power equals existential threat. He also knew the resource strain of losing a hive world. He knew that Exterminatus could incite rebellion. He knew the Emperor's words. Only when the value of a world has been weighed and found wanting. Beerus did not hear those words, but he felt the pressure of the decision like a rising tide. The psychic resonance of billions of minds quivered. Hope and despair mingled with ignorance. The thought of being reduced to atomic dust weighed on them. Beerus's nose twitched as he caught the scent of fear carried through the warp. It was bitter but not unpleasant. He smirked. He wondered if those above realized how little he cared for their deliberations. He wondered if he should show them their insignificance. Whiz glanced upward, sensing the heaviness too. He recognized the signature of a cyclonic torpedo arming far beyond the atmosphere. He calculated the energy yield. He calculated the probability of Beerus reacting poorly to an orbital bombardment. He decided to nudge events gently. He raised his staff slightly. A soft pulse traveled upward, interfering with the torpedo's arming sequence, delaying it by minutes. He did not stop it. He merely bought time. Vorinth continued. If we bombard the hive, we may kill the entity or we may irritate it. If we fail to act, it may leave or it may decide to cleanse the rest of the city. The Emperor teaches us to be decisive, but not foolish. The Death Watch captain spoke. He had faced the entity and lived.
It fights against chaos, he said slowly.
It showed restraint. It could have slaughtered us.
It did not. Silence followed.
The Admiral shifted. Tech priests' servo arms clicked. The governor exhaled. A sister clasped her rosary. Vorinth's eyes narrowed. He turned to another Vox unit. Inquisitor Malrek, he said. The unit crackled. Malrek's voice answered, calm, almost bored. I recommend observation, Malrek replied. Interference may achieve nothing. The entity appears to follow its own code. It has closed warp rifts. We have lost no more citizens since its arrival than we would in a normal uprising. Let it finish. Then cleanse the area of residual taint. Vorinth frowned. He did not like inaction, yet he also did not like waste. He looked at the Admiral, who shrugged. The sister nodded slightly. The Death Watch captain looked relieved. The governor nearly wept. The Mechanicus priest recited the litany of containment. Vorinth made his decision. Stand down Exterminatus for now. Maintain watch. Ready the torpedoes. If the entity shows signs of turning on the faithful, we will not hesitate. He signed the order. Beerus, far below, continued along a narrow bridge, spanning a chasm filled with glowing refuse. He watched the flows of energy around him. He felt the moment of decision pass above like a breeze. He shrugged. Mortals would do as mortals do. He was here for his own reasons. The path ahead opened into a cavern lit by machines and skulls. He smelled fresh blood and cold metal. He tasted anticipation. The council of zealots would wait. He would not. He stepped into the cavern. Whis drifted behind, the faintest smile playing on his lips. Time itself seemed to relax, tension easing as torpedoes remained still. Above, Vorenth leaned back, decision made. Below, a god of destruction stalked his prey. The path curved, leading them through a forest of metal columns supporting weight no one alive remembered. Torchlight flickered, casting shifting patterns on Beerus's purple skin. He moved slower now, the urgency of the drumbeat gone. In its absence, thoughts rose. He remembered countless worlds reduced to rubble. Some he had destroyed to maintain cosmic balance at Zeno's bidding. Others he had erased because their rulers had insulted him or served terrible food. He had thought himself above mortals' concerns. Yet this world had drawn him down into its veins, not through duty, but through curiosity. He stopped beside a rusted statue of a space marine. The face had long melted, but the posture remained proud. At its base, someone had written a prayer, simple and misspelled. Beerus traced the glyphs, leaving grooves in the corrosion. The Emperor's presence, distant and cold, had brushed against him earlier. It felt like a mirror held up to his own nature. The Emperor sat on a throne half dead, sustaining an empire built on endless war. Beerus slept on a world far away, woke occasionally, destroyed planets and went back to sleep. Both existed to maintain some form of order. Both were worshipped by those who could not comprehend them. One acted through legions, the other acted on whims. Beerus's tail swayed, brushing dust, balance. Whis had spoken of it many times in training. Destruction created space for creation. Beerus had never been a philosopher. He preferred to eat a nap. Yet here, in silent corridors, he pondered. If he destroyed this world, what would take its place? If he let the warp tear, what would emerge? Did he care? The answer simmered. He found that he did care, not because of empathy, but because of interest. Annihilating everything indiscriminately bored him. Dealing with mortals who challenged him amused him. Encountering other gods intrigued him. Preserving this hive might lead to more diversions later. He chuckled quietly at the thought. Whis watched him.
Moments of introspection were rare.
They usually preceded decisive action. Whis knew the desire for balance often guided Beerus more than pride allowed him to admit. The angel smiled inwardly. He had once told Beerus that even gods were part of a larger pattern. To see Beerus contemplating without immediate destruction suggested growth, or at least curiosity beyond his universe. A sound drifted, the clatter of boots, the scrape of armor. The Death Watch had recovered. They followed at a distance, now wiser. Beerus turned his head slightly, listening. He did not feel threatened. He felt observed. He continued. The path opened into a cavern where rock met metal. Piles of ash rested against walls. The smell of smoke lingered. In the center, a lone servitor knelt, arms raised to an altar that was nothing more than an upturned crate. It intoned a prayer to the Omnissiah in monotone. Its vox emitter crackled. Beerus passed without disturbing it. The servitor continued its chant, its world untouched by gods and demons alike. As they moved on, earlier questions remained unanswered but less pressing. He decided that leaving this world as it was, scarred but alive, fit his mood better than blasting it apart. Destroying it now would deprive him of future entertainment should he decide to return. Besides, he was still annoyed about the lack of proper food. He would speak to Whis about obtaining something better when they left. For now, he let the thought settle. He followed the flicker of torches, the drip of condensation, the distant shuffle of boots. The journey continued, his mind calmer. Softly, Wiss's voice brushed against his consciousness, promising dessert once they were home. Beerus's ears perked. The promise of food did more to anchor his decision than any philosophical musing. He smiled. The path curved onward, drawing them toward whatever remained unseen. The corridor opened into a hall of rusted gears. Shadows clung to the machinery like clotted grease. Beerus slowed, licking crumbs from his claws. The sweetness of Wiss's pastry had softened the metallic tang lingering on his tongue. The silence allowed thoughts to surface. He had felt the Emperor's mind an ocean of duty and pain. He had compared it to his own existence. He destroyed worlds with a flick, then slept. The Emperor held the weight of an empire with eyes closed. The difference was stark and irrelevant. Each was bound by duty, but Beerus's duty was to balance destruction with his own pleasure. Was drifted alongside, staff tucked under one arm. He sensed contemplation. In his own way, Beerus wondered if his actions here had meaning beyond the moment. Wiss spoke gently into Beerus's mind. You sensed the Emperor, yes. Consider what you would become if you never slept, if you fought off chaos every second, if your followers bound you to a throne. Beerus imagined himself strapped to a chair, unable to nap. He shuddered. No thank you, he thought back. Wiss smiled. Balance, then, he replied. He produced another sweet glazed with honey and offered it. Beerus took it, teeth sinking into soft dough. Each bite grounded him, a reminder of simpler joys. The angel continued. Restraint is not weakness. Sometimes letting a world survive brings more interest later. You have seen that mortals will worship anything that saves them.
Imagine their stories if we simply vanish.
Beerus considered. Universe 7's mortals told tales about him too. He preferred the ones that ended with feasts. He finished the pastry and licked his lips clean. Behind them, the clatter of ceramite boots echoed. The Deathwatch squad had regained its footing. They advanced through the tunnels. Beerus's tail flicked. Annoyance pricked. He turned, ready to flick them away. Wiss moved first. He drew a circle in the air with his staff. A ring of light appeared ahead of the Marines. They stepped through and found themselves in a different corridor, sealed behind a blast door. To them, it would be as if the passage had simply shifted. No harm done, no battle necessary. Beerus snorted. He would have enjoyed swatting them, but Wiss's way spared them and saved time. Not every conflict is worth our energy, Wiss observed. Beerus grunted assent. He took comfort in the idea that he could choose which battles to fight. He had fought a demon because it entertained him. He had spared Space Marines because they annoyed him less than the cultists. He had destroyed a ritual because the noise bothered him. The reasons were his own. Wiss would not judge, only remind him to consider. The hall ended in a lift shaft. Cables dangled like veins. Wiss touched his staff to the ground. A platform assembled itself. They stepped onto it. It rose smoothly, passing through layers of rock and metal. Beerus looked up. Far above, a faint green glow marked the place where they had first landed. He felt the Emperor's beacon again, a dull throb. He ignored it. He smelled the outside air, still rancid but less oppressive. He heard the murmur of crowds, the distant boom of artillery somewhere else. He felt a thread of anticipation. Their time in this world was nearly done. The angel's melody of counsel echoed, reminding him that even gods could learn restraint. The lift rose toward the surface. The path home waited. When the lift reached a massive transit bay, Beerus and Wiss stepped out into a space that once buzzed with freight haulers. The tracks were twisted now, crates overturned. Shafts of light cut through gloom. Footsteps echoed from a side tunnel. The familiar silhouettes of the Deathwatch squad appeared. 5 towering warriors, helmets off, bolters lowered. They moved toward the 2 gods with cautious intent. Brother Lieutenant Corvath halted a few meters away and raised an empty hand. His scarred face was set. "We thank you," he began, each word scraping his throat. His brothers shifted uneasily. "You killed the demon. You broke the ritual. We serve the Emperor. We cannot ignore Xenos, but we know when we are outmatched." He swallowed pride.
Leave this city, he added, a plea couched as an order. Beerus stared, tails swishing.
He could have vaporized them. Instead, he saw honesty and strain. These warriors had been ready to die, and now they were unsure what to do. Wiss drifted forward, expression gentle. His presence conveyed assent. "We are leaving," the unspoken thought said. Corvath exhaled. Relief flickered. Brother Savell murmured something akin to a prayer. The squad lowered their shoulders slightly. They had not expected mercy. Beerus flicked his wrist. A pulse of Kai rippled outward, ruffling their capes. It was a sign I could, but I do not. They flinched, then understood. Wheeze produced a small box from his sleeve and placed it on a crate. Inside lay glazed pastries, warm and fragrant. The angel gestured. The Marines exchanged confused glances. Brother Varnus reached out, took one, and bit cautiously. His eyes widened. It was sweet, unlike anything in a fortress monastery. Brother Cale followed. Their war-weary faces softened. Dessert as diplomacy was unheard of in the Imperium. Wiss's offering broke tension more effectively than a sermon. The act underscored the gulf between them. Beerus and Wiss operated on whims, offering destruction or kindness as it amused them. The Marines lived by doctrine, yet here their paths crossed without bloodshed. Corvath nodded. "Go," he repeated, steadier now. "We will not interfere." Beerus yawned, uninterested in prolonged exchange, and turned toward the exit. Piz inclined his head politely. The two gods walked away. Behind them, the Death Watch watched until the figures vanished into shadow. They would return to their Inquisitor and describe a battle they could not win and a moment of mercy that defied expectation. They would remember the taste of pastries in a war zone. It would not change the Imperium, but it would live in them as an anomaly. Beerus and Wiss did not look back. They left the warriors to their duties and followed the path toward the surface. The encounter ended, leaving behind humility and gratitude in armored hearts. The final tunnel sloped upward. Fresh air, if such a term applied to hive-world atmosphere, filtered down. The tang of chemicals lessened. Distant horns and sirens mingled with the hum of millions of lives. Beerus's stride lengthened. He sensed open space ahead and the threads of Kai connecting him to his universe. The tier that had brought them here had closed behind them, but their presence had stirred currents that would allow their return. Wiss adjusted his staff. He was calculating coordinates. They emerged onto a shattered platform open to the sky. Rusted railing ran along the edge, broken in places. A cold wind blew, carrying ash and the smell of promethium. Above, the cloud cover still churned, bruise-colored and thick. Somewhere beyond those clouds, starships floated, their captains debating whether to rain fire. In the distance, towers smoldered, fires burning where riots or battles had erupted. A red sun hung low, filtered through smog. Beerus walked to the edge and looked down. The hive stretched endlessly, levels upon levels of misery. He saw flashes of gunfire, heard the faint crack of bolter shells, the screams, the prayers. For a moment he felt nothing. Then curiosity nudged him. Would the Emperor notice if he erased this place? Would anyone besides Wiss care? He sensed again the Emperor's beacon, a steady thrum. He tasted its warning. Not yet.
He smirked. Wiz raised his staff.
Emerald light flared from its tip, tracing a circle in the air.
A gateway formed.
The portal shimmered, colors swirling. Beerus squinted. He saw glimpses of his temple beyond, polished floors, towering columns, an enormous pillow awaiting him. He smelled the aroma of stew. His mouth watered. He stepped forward. Below eyes watched. Arbites, governors, acolytes, all observed the sky. Auspex arrays locked onto the energy signature. Vox channels filled with warnings. For some, this was the sign they had waited for. The Xenos leaving. For others, it was proof of suspicions. These beings could open reality at will. The Emperor's tarot would interpret it in 1,000 ways. Songs would be written. Sermons would be preached. None of it mattered to the figures on the platform. Beerus glanced over his shoulder. He saw the Death Watch squad far down the ramp, still watching. He saw smoke rising from ritual chambers. He saw the faint glow of the Emperor's beacon piercing the clouds. He nodded once, a gesture to no one in particular. Perhaps to the world, perhaps to the beacon, perhaps just to himself. Wiss smiled faintly, sensing a rare moment of respect. The god of destruction, turned toward the portal. He raised his hand as if to touch it, then paused. A thought flitted through his mind. Would the Emperor ever wake? Would he eat anything? If he did, would he offer Beerus a dish worthy of his palate? The idea amused him. He chuckled. Without another glance, he stepped into the emerald light. His form blurred. For a heartbeat, his outline shimmered between realities. Then it was gone. Lingered half a second longer. He turned his head, eyes sweeping the hive. He offered a small nod, a benediction without religion. He stepped into the portal. The circle closed behind them with a soft hum. No tearing, no explosion. Just silence. The wind blew. Ash settled. The world did not end. It simply continued minus 2 visitors. Above in the strategium, Inquisitor Vorinth noted the energy spike. He ordered weapons to stand down. He wrote that the entities had departed. He filed recommendations for cleansing rituals and mental screenings. He added a note about desserts being used as negotiation tools. In the underhive, cultists' screams gave way to quiet. Stories began to circulate of a purple cat god who saved the hive. Arbites dismissed them as heresy. On Terra, the Emperor's mind brushed briefly against a memory of a feline grin and dismissed it. The universe spun on. The path to beyond had closed. Possibility lingered, tales to be told, wars to be fought, and perhaps another visit someday. Days passed. Smoke thinned. Arbites and guard units reclaimed hab blocks. Mechanicus assessed damage. Priests chanted litanies to cleanse air and ground. Tech priests burned incense to appease machine spirits rattled by warp-tainted energies. In the underhive, gangs returned to turf wars. The absence of cult leaders created a vacuum filled by new savages. The rituals that had promised transcendence were reduced to whispered warnings told around barrel fires. Yet something changed. In alcoves and corners, in darkness between lumens, whispers spread of a different god. Not the corpse on the throne, not the blood god demanding skulls, but a sleek, purple figure who descended when the sky tore. In some stories, he was a demon prince who devoured cult leaders. In others, he was an angel of the Emperor, disguised as an animal. Children repeated tales of a cat who flicked his tail and turned monsters to dust. Scavengers swore they had seen him yawn while artillery shells bounced off his fur. An old crone insisted he had eaten her stew and paid her with a star. None of these stories were entirely true.
None were entirely false. In a small chapel converted from a hab unit, a sister listened to a child describe the purple god.
The child's eyes were wide. Her hands mimed the flick of a claw. The sister smiled and gently turned the tale into a lesson about the Emperor's protection. In a tavern, a drunk ganger slammed his cup and swore he had fought alongside the cat. His fellows laughed, but a few listened. In the Arbites precinct, a scribe recorded testimonies with a mixture of amusement and concern. Her commanding officer ordered them sealed. The Inquisition would decide what to do. In a hidden chamber near the ritual site, ragged survivors gathered. They had been cultists once, now lost. They lit candles and placed small offerings before a crudely drawn image of Beerus scratched into the wall. They whispered prayers, unsure of the name. They asked for protection, not from the Emperor, but from spirits they had betrayed. They offered scraps of food and trinkets. They waited. Nothing happened. Still, they returned the next night. An embryonic cult formed, dedicated not to blood or decay, but to something they did not understand. It would likely be burned out when discovered. For now, it grew in cracks left by war. Above, Vorinth compiled his report. He described the entity's powers. He recommended increased surveillance on warp rifts. He suggested cross-reference with Ordo Xenos. He proposed that the event be classified. He cited the instance of hospitality as unusual. He noted the emergence of myths. He advised immediate suppression to prevent heretical cults. His signature sealed the document. It joined thousands of others in vaults under Terra. In the Mechanicus enclave, Magos Raiken examined remnants of the altar. He catalogued the residual energy. He wrote equations describing how the destructive force manipulated reality. He proposed experiments, though he knew they would be denied. He dreamed of creating a weapon that could mimic the flick. He prayed to the Omnissiah. He received only silence. Life resumed its brutal rhythm. Production quotas resumed. Workers returned to posts. Servitors whirred.
Children played.
The sun rose and set behind smog. The Emperor's beacon pulsed, guiding souls. The events of those days faded for most, replaced by daily struggle. For a few they remained vivid. They became stories told at night, myths etched in soot and smoke, seeds of something that might grow into new faiths or heresies. The hive remained a place of suffering, industry, and resilience. The presence of a god had not changed its nature. It had only added another layer to its complex tapestry of belief and fear. If Beerus's name would be whispered centuries from now, it would be as cautionary tale or joke. Either way, the memory lingered, soot-stained and stubborn. On Terra, in a vault lined with adamantium and sanctified by the prayers of millions, the lords of the Inquisition convened. They sat in high-backed chairs. Servo skulls drifted overhead. At the center stood a hololithic display of Morai Secundus. Red marks highlighted areas of recent conflict. Green runes traced the path of the unknown entity. Blue arrows showed troop movements. The display flickered as access codes were entered. Inquisitor Vorinth spoke, voice measured. He presented his findings. He described the incursion. He did not embellish. He offered raw data, energy readings off the chart, the brief encounter with the Death Watch, the destruction of cult rituals, the battle against a warp creature, the departure through a self-generated portal. He emphasized the entity's unknown origin, lack of warp taint, capacity for both violence and mercy. He noted the decision to withhold exterminatus. He accepted responsibility and awaited judgment. Lord Inquisitor Helena Krasny leaned forward. Her eyes were pale, rimmed with age. She had authorized destruction of worlds. She had also ordered mercy. She listened and weighed his words. "Your restraint may have spared millions," she said quietly. "It may also have exposed the Imperium to unknown danger. We cannot predict the motives of beings like this." She looked at the assembled Inquisitors. Some nodded, others frowned. Lord Militant Barrows cracked his knuckles. "We fight Xenos and heretics daily," he said. "We kill those we do not understand. Yet if the Astartes captain reports this thing killed demons and cultists and walked away, I cannot easily condemn your choice. We need to know more." He tapped the table. "Recommend surveillance.
Send Ordo Xenos teams.
Interrogate survivors. Hunt any new worship they inspire. Prepare to eradicate if necessary. Magos Dominus Terrac clicked his mechadendrites. The energy signature recorded is instructive," he stated. "We propose research. Containment protocols can be developed. We could replicate the destructive force." Lord Krasny raised a hand. "Denied. The risks outweigh the benefits."
Observe only. A hooded figure spoke.
Lord Inquisitor Valak of the Ordo Sicarius had assassinated more heretics than the Guard had killed. When the Emperor walked in flesh, he encountered Xenos and powers beyond. He chose allies when it served. He annihilated when necessary. We must be ready for both.
Keep this classified.
Teach our agents to recognize the signs. If the symbol on this entity's armor appears again, it must be reported. Do not attempt to engage unless exterminatus is already warranted," the conclave murmured. Vorinth bowed his head. His report would be sealed, accessible only to those with need-to-know clearance. He would be tasked with monitoring Morai Secundus for cults. He would send kill teams to burn them. He would remain vigilant. Yet a small part wondered. He had heard his men speak of a pastry. He dismissed it as stress-induced hallucination, yet it lingered. He imagined a world where gods bargained with sweets. He shook his head. The meeting adjourned. Inquisitors dispersed to plan further wars. In a side corridor, Vorinth folded his hands. He offered a silent prayer for guidance. He vowed to remain watchful. He added a new sigil to his personal codex, representing a feline head with golden eyes. It would remind him that the universe was stranger than doctrine allowed. The Lord Inquisitor's words rang in the vault long after. We face threats from without and within. We adapt, we remain vigilant. We remember that the Emperor's like guides, even when our understanding falters. Be ready, be patient. Act with the precision of a scalpel, not the broad swing of a warhammer, until necessary. The admonition was recorded, sealed, and filed alongside countless others. The Imperium turned its attention to the next war. The memory of a godlike stranger lingered in the margins. Emerald light dissolved into the warm twilight of Beerus's home. Pillars carved with scenes of his past deeds rose toward a high ceiling painted with galaxies. The scent of spices floated in the air. Outside, calm waters reflected twin moons. Inside, servitors arranged a table laden with steaming dishes. The contrast to the hive's stench and grime was soothing. Beerus stepped through the portal and stretched, muscles loosening. His tail flicked. He inhaled deeply.
A purr rumbled from his throat.
Eyes followed, and with a tap of his staff closed the circle. It shrank and winked out. They were home. They approached the table. Plates piled with delicacies awaited. Buns stuffed with savory fillings, bowls of fragrant noodles, towers of fruit cut into stars. Beerus sank onto a cushion and attacked the feast, tearing bread, slurping noodles, biting into juicy fruit. Juice ran down his chin. Whis sat more gracefully, sampling a dumpling, noting seasoning, making mental adjustments. He had prepared this meal to ground his pupil after the warp's chaos. As Beerus ate, tension melted. His ears relaxed. His eyes drooped contentedly. Between bites, images from the hive flickered, smoke-choked halls, the Emperor's oppressive presence, the roar of a greater demon, the odd sincerity of space marines eating pastries. He considered the choice not to destroy the planet. Restraint, Whis had said, could be powerful. It had been an interesting exercise. He wondered if the Emperor, entombed in metal, would ever know that a god from another universe had walked his realms. He imagined offering him pudding. He chuckled softly and reached for more fruit. Whis heard and smiled. He touched Beerus's mind. It will take them centuries to understand, he thought. Some will mythologize.
Some will forget.
We will remember only the taste of their trap stew and our laughter, Beerus snorted. Worship mattered only when accompanied by offerings. He wiped his mouth and continued eating. When the feast was done, Beerus leaned back, belly full. Servitors whisked away plates. Whis poured tea scented with herbs. Beerus sipped, letting the warmth wash away the last metallic hints of the hive. He sighed. Sleep crept along his limbs. He curled on his cushion, tail wrapped neatly, eyes half closed. Nap, he thought. Whis nodded. He tapped his staff on the polished floor. A gentle melody filled the hall, a lullaby older than galaxies. Beerus's ears twitched. He closed his eyes. His breathing slowed. Sleep claimed him. Whis remained a moment longer. He watched his charge's chest rise and fall. He considered the ripple their excursion would cause. He resolved to monitor the multiverse for similar tears. He turned and walked to the balcony.
Night was clear.
Stars shimmered softly, unaffected by war. He inhaled crisp air. He thought of the Emperor chained to a throne, of Zeno's childlike giggle, of balance. He smiled. The temple settled into quiet.
Inside, a god slept off his meal. Outside, the universe spun.
On a faraway hive world, tales of a purple cat flicking demons into dust began to spread. The soft, emotional handoff between worlds completed its cycle. Across the gulf of dimensions, ripples spread from Morae Secundus like circles expanding on a pond. They traveled not just through space, but through the fabric of realities. In the warp, where thought became matter and time bled into itself, demons paused. The blood god Khorne threw back his horned head and roared. His champions had been denied skulls. His rituals had been broken. His mortal followers had been erased by a flick of a purple claw.
Rage burned within him, yet in that rage there was recognition.
In another universe, another aspect of carnage existed, cloaked in feline form. Khorne slammed his axes together. He vowed to one day taste that god's skull. For now he turned his fury on lesser foes. His roars echoed through the warp, inspiring bloodshed across 1,000 worlds. In the Golden Throne Chamber on Terra, the Emperor's mind drifted. He held the Astronomicon steady as always, but a fragment of his awareness returned to a memory of purple fur and golden eyes. He did not smile, he could not. Yet the edges of his relentless drive softened. He had glimpsed the possibility of other gods beyond the Chaos Pantheon and the Old Ones. It reminded him that the universe was larger than even he could conceive. He filed the knowledge away like a general considering an unexpected ally or a potential threat. He tightened his grip on reality and resumed his vigil. On Beerus's homeworld, the waters of the lake reflected twin moons and the gentle rise and fall of a sleeping god's chest. Whis stood on the balcony, staff resting at his side. He sensed the faint echo of Khorne's rage and the Emperor's contemplative thought like distant thunderheads. He felt Zeno's bright presence as if someone had opened a door in a distant palace. The childlike supreme deity giggled without understanding why. Maybe he dreamed of cats. The echoes would fade, but he marked them. Each represented a potential intersection of narratives. In the warp, other entities took note. Tsench muttered to himself, threads of possibility weaving around his talons. Slanesh tasted the energy and licked lips that were not lips. Nurgle chuckled, seeds of new plagues ready to sprout. They would all spin stories around the purple god's brief visit. In dark corners, human psychers had visions of golden eyes and finger flicks, their sanity fraying. In the library of Tsench's realm, a book wrote itself. Its pages smelled faintly of ash and pastries. In Universe 7, the Kaioshin stars blinked. Elder Kai scratched his ear. Something tickled at the edge of his awareness. He shrugged and returned to his magazine.
On Earth, Goku trained oblivious.
Vegeta sensed a disturbance and scowled, blaming Kakarot for eating the last bun. The universes continued their cycles, unaffected. In Mirai Secundus's underhive, the soot-stained myths grew. A young Ganga carved a small idol shaped like a cat, hiding it beneath his bunk. A tech priest wrote a treatise titled On the Potential for Non-Chaotic Extra-Universal Entities, then locked it away. A little girl told her brother bedtime stories about a god of destruction who flicked away nightmares. The brother slept better. A preacher denounced these tales from the pulpit and whipped his congregation into fervor. Their prayers mingled with whispered myths, forming a tangled litany that drifted upward. On a Death Watch strike cruiser, Brother Lieutenant Korvath cleaned his bolter. He thought of the cat's golden eyes and the sweetness of the pastry he had tasted. He did not tell his brothers he sometimes dreamed of it. He muttered the Emperor's prayers, then added a line of his own, a thank you without specifying to whom. He was a pragmatic warrior. He prayed to any power that kept his men alive. He sharpened his blade, ready for the next mission. The echoes continued for years, perhaps millennia. They would appear in songs sung by hive scum and coded messages sent by inquisitors. They would inspire and corrupt, soothe and frighten. They would remind those who knew of them that there were powers in the universe beyond understanding. In the grim darkness of the far future, where there was only war, a flicker of color had appeared and then gone. It left behind ripples that touched gods and mortals alike. In the temple of Beerus, night deepened. Whis stepped inside. He saw his charge sleeping peacefully, crumbs at the corner of his mouth. He smiled and extinguished the lantern. The chamber went dark except for the glow of stars painted on the ceiling. Outside, a gentle wind rustled leaves. The echoes crossed realities, weaving into the tapestry of both universes. Somewhere, A child whispered the name of a cat god. Somewhere else, a warlord spat and sharpened his axe. The cycle continued. The emotional handoff between worlds settled into calm. For now, destruction slept. Creation breathed. Balance, however fleeting, was maintained. If you hunger for more tales of impossible encounters in the dark millennium, smash that subscribe button. And the Emperor protects those who support the channel.